Shalom Aleichem. We're exploring Likutei Sichos, Chelek Chaf Aleph, volume 21, Shemos, Sicha number 2. This Sicha is connected to the famous promise from Hashem to Abraham Avinu. You need to know, this is Parshas Lech Lecha, that your children will be slaves in a foreign land, and they will enslave them for 400 years, etc., torture them. But then the nation that will enslave them will be punished, and the Jews will leave with great wealth. Unquote. That's the psukim, the verses in Parshas Lech Lecha, in Genesis and Bereshis, where Hashem tells Avraham Avinu the bad news and the good news. And now we come to Shemos, the beginning of the book of Exodus, where this is starting to play out. And Hashem comes to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moses, when he asks him to take the job as the Redeemer of Israel at the burning bush. And he tells him the whole thing. I want you to go, pa-pa-pa-pa. And right there, in one of the first conversations that they're having, Hashem tells him that's going to be wonders and miracles and plagues, and Egypt is not going to let them go right away. I'm going to show my mighty hand, etc., etc. And in that early dialogue, Hashem tells him, and by the way, when the time comes to leave, I am going to create favor by the Egyptians for the Jews. The Egyptians are going to feel like this sudden love for the Jews, and they're going to give them gifts. They won't leave empty-handed. Which is strange. Like, why is this right at the beginning? This is not going to be relevant for a year and a half. Hashem's talking to him at a burning bush, and then in the interim, there has to be 10 plagues. Each plague takes approximately a month. And then everything else. So this is a year later. Why is this so important right then? It's not relevant. Like, why does he have to tell? There's nothing actionable here on the part of Moshe Rabbeinu. I want you to know that I'm going to find favor. The people the Egyptians are going to like them, and they're going to send them away with wealth, etc. So the Medrash helps us out. The Medrash says, in order that Avraham Avinu not complain, the language is he shouldn't be able to open his mouth. He shouldn't have a valid argument. That Hashem, you only kept half of your promise. The bad news you kept, the good news you didn't. The part that says they'll be enslaved and tortured, you did that. But the fact that they will leave with great wealth, you didn't do that. And therefore, I want you to know, Moshe Rabbeinu, from day one in our conversation, I want you to know that this is going to work out, and there's going to be the good news, not only freedom, but freedom with great wealth, and Avraham Avinu will not be able to have any complaints. This is the Medrash. And the Rebbe asks a very simple question. What you would call it a balabata shashayla. It's practical. It's basic, if you will. You don't have to be a rocket science genius to come up with this question. That's why Hashem is telling Moshe Rabbeinu that the Egyptians are going to give the Jews wealth in order to avoid Avraham Avinu, Abraham, having complaints. He has to do it because he promised. Hashem promised Avraham Avinu that there's going to be great wealth. He's going to do it. He should have simply said to Moshe that I'm going to that the Medrash should say, yeah, as I promised. I keep my word. Everyone is obligated to keep their word. It's a mitzvah in the Torah, let alone Hashem, the giver of the Torah. Plus, it says that it's known that Hashem never changes his word. It's impossible for him to change his word. Famous words of the prophet. He's not a man who can have regrets and change his mind. If he gave his word, it's his word forever. So why do we need this whole long conversation that the Medrash is telling us? That why is this Hashem telling Moshe Rabbeinu about this whole future? That Egypt's going to like the Jews and give them gifts. You know why? So Avraham shouldn't have a taina, shouldn't have a complaint. You know why? Because he promised. So this is a very strange Medrash. Now, we find a similar thing in Parshas Boy in 2 weeks from now, which is like 10 months later. Now we already, Moshe Rabbeinu went to Pharaoh and it started the plagues and etc. etc. And towards the end of the plagues, as we're winding down, getting ready for Exodus, Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, please ask the Jewish people to borrow from their neighbors the gold and silver. So the Gemara says, as opposed to the Medrash, which is quoted on this week's portion, the Gemara says on the portion of Boy, why does it say, please speak to the people? That's the language. Please tell the people that they should borrow the goodies from Egypt and take it with them. Because why, please? So that Avraham Avinu, that great tzaddik, should not be able to say that you didn't keep your promise. You kept the bad news and not the good news. You kept the slavery, you didn't keep the wealth. So the Rebbe says the Gemara is not so problematic. The Gemara is not so problematic as the Medrash is. In fact, the Gemara makes perfect sense. The Gemara is not explaining why Hashem is going to orchestrate that the Jews should walk out wealthy. That's obvious. He has to keep his word. The Gemara is trying to explain why the people were asked to go and borrow from their neighbors. Because the inclination of the people at the time was, I don't care about the wealth, just get me out of here. After the slavery and everything, the butchering of the babies and the Pharaoh bathing in their blood and all this stuff, the Jews were told it's time to go. I don't need the wealth. I'll forego on it. Just get me out. And therefore Hashem said to Moshe, please tell the people, I know you might want to forego on the wealth, but please don't, for my sake, because I don't want Avraham to have any complaints. So that verse and that Gemara makes perfect sense. Yes, Hashem promised wealth, and therefore it's important that it actualizes, otherwise Avraham is going to complain. And therefore Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, tell the Jews they better do it, even if they're inclined to forego on it. But if you go back to our parsha, this is not Hashem telling the Jews to borrow the goodies. This is Hashem prophesying to Moshe that the Gentiles will feel like they want to give it. He doesn't have to explain why. Yeah, in order so he can keep his promise. What is the meaning of the Medrash? That why would Hashem promise that the Goyim are going to want to give it? So that Avraham shouldn't be able to complain? Meaning without Avraham's complaint, Hashem would not fulfill this? It doesn't make any sense. It's a very strong question. So, in the box, you have what we just discussed. We have the verse in Shemos, and we have the verse in Boy, and the corresponding oral Torah on each. On the verse in Shemos, it says that, I'm just recapping real quick, Hashem says that I'll make the Egyptians have favor for the Jews, and they will not leave empty-handed. In the Medrash says Avraham Avinu shouldn't complain. That what you fulfilled in them, quote, they were slaved and tortured, but you didn't fulfill them that they're going to leave with great wealth. Then we have Parshas Boy in 2 weeks upon Exodus, on the cusp of Exodus. Please tell the Jews to borrow from Egypt vessels of gold and silver, so they take it with them. Says the Gemara, what does it mean? Please do this, so the tzaddik, Avraham Avinu, shouldn't say that you only kept the bad news and not the good news. So the Rebbe's questions is a few questions. I made them into 3. There's really a little bit more than that. But I'm bolding the first question because that's the main question that we just discussed. The Medrash is totally perplexing. Is that the only reason to keep his promised wealth? Because to avoid a complaint from Avraham Avinu? He's God. He keeps his promised wealth because he made a promise. It's so strange. And the Rebbe points out that the Gemara is not problematic, because the Gemara is not explaining why Hashem has to keep his promise. The Gemara is explaining why the Jews need to ask for the wealth, which they might otherwise be inclined to forego upon at that point in their torturous exile. That makes sense. Tell the Jews, no. I know you feel like leaving without the wealth. Do me a favor, says God. Please, I don't want to have Avraham Avinu complaining upstairs or whatever. Please do this so that Avraham doesn't complain. So the Gemara is fine. It's not problematic. But the Medrash doesn't seem to make any sense. It's a big question. If not for Hashem's fear that Avraham is not going to like it, he wouldn't give them the wealth. Then the Rebbe gives us a few diukim, 2 and 3. Number two, the emphasis. Look in both the Medrash and the Gemara. The emphasis is what's going to be Avram's comment, that you fulfilled in them they'll be enslaved and tortured, and you have not fulfilled in them like they're going to leave with great wealth. In Hebrew, kiyim bahem. This same language repeats itself both in the Medrash and the Gemara. What does it mean, fulfilled in them? Just say fulfilled. That's a typical language. That Hashem gave a promise, and a kiyim, he fulfilled this, and this promise, like kiyim, he didn't fulfill. That's not such an uncommon language in Torah and in oral Torah. But here the emphasis is, and again we see it repeated in the Medrash and in the Gemara, that he fulfilled it in them, and he didn't fulfill this in them. That cannot be random. That bothers the Rebbe. There's meaning there. And then finally, if you analyze the Medrash and the Gemara, they seem to have the general same theme, but there are nuances that jump off the page. In the Medrash, it says, Hashem says, so that Avraham Avinu not complain. And in the Gemara, it says, so that tzaddik should not say, referencing Avraham Avinu. But remember, every word in Torah, in oral Torah, is perfect and precise, especially when you see a deviation between one and the other. It's on purpose. Why does the Medrash refer to him as Avraham Avinu and the Gemara as that tzaddik? Oto tzaddik, that tzaddik. Just say Avraham Avinu. Why do we have to be poetic? Especially the Gemara, which is not famous for its poetry. That would be more Medrash-like, maybe. And B, Avraham Avinu, you're saying he should not complain. And here, so the tzaddik, Avraham Avinu, should not say. And the Rebbe is going to bring all of this together, again, primarily answering question number one, because that's the big question here. That's the home run question here. Namely, why do you have to have explanations why Hashem has to keep his wealth, that it has to do with Avram complaining? Once we answer that, everything else is going to fall into place. So, the Rebbe's explanation. The Rebbe's explanation. This line is really the core of this part of the Sikha. The Medrash and the Gemara are not discussing if Hashem will fulfill his promise. Of course he will. But the manner in which it will be fulfilled. This is already total genius and bombshell right away. This is a whole different way to look at the language of the Medrash and the Gemara. Let's use the Medrash. Let's focus on the Medrash, make it simple. Everybody who learned this Medrash, and this brought in Rashi, right, looks at it that the Hashem is saying why this promise will be fulfilled. No, that's not what the Medrash means. It's not a question of if it'll be fulfilled. Of course it'll be fulfilled. I don't need a reason why it should be fulfilled because everyone's going to complain. It'll be fulfilled because I promised it. Hashem keeps his promises. Heck, we're supposed to keep our promises. It's not a question of if. It's a question of how, in what fashion. It's brilliant. That this has to be coming from the volition of the Egyptians. It could have been the Jews will get their wealth in the middle of the night. They'll steal it during the darkness of Cheshek, the plague of darkness, or otherwise they'll miraculously fly away with them. And here, no, the wealth was given to them by the Egyptians, by their volition. It was given to them. They found favors in the eyes of the Egyptian. They offered it voluntarily. That's what it's talking about in the Medrash. So when Hashem says to Moshe right at the beginning of the story at the burning bush, today's Parsha, I want you to know how the story's going to end. The Jews are going to leave wealthy, but they're not going to leave wealthy. So I can keep my promise. The Jews are going to find favor in the eyes of their nemesis, of their former tasked slave masters, and they will make them rich by their volition. That's an important piece. And that's what this becomes about. This is a discussion of not if, but how this blessing will be fulfilled. Of course it will be fulfilled, but not in some miraculous way or some darkness and night way, but it will be fulfilled with favor, with voluntarism. The Goyim are going to say, here, take it, it's yours, you deserve it. Which is a fantastic difference. And this is, so if we just look at this, the way Hashem promised it to Avraham in Lech Lecha, he just said, the Jews will have wealth, but we don't know if the Jews will take it or will be given to them. They're going to go with great wealth. Hashem and Shemos promises that it's going to be a gift to the Jews. It's going to be given to them. Now, why is that important? And in a minute, the Rebbe is going to explain not only is Shemos one step above Lech Lecha, that they're not taking it, but it's given to them. But we're going to see Bo and the Gemara is a second step above, as we'll see in a moment. But why is this even important? Why is it such a big deal that the Jews get this from the Egyptians joyfully and voluntarily, that the Egyptians want to give it to them? How is that something that would be upsetting to Avraham Avinu if not? If they just got it in any other way? They still got the money. So the Rebbe explains by prefacing, that when we talk about the concept that the Jews have to take Egypt's wealth, there's two ways to look at this. We know the Jews have to take Egypt's wealth. It was promised to Avraham Avinu. It's part of the plan. But why? Why is that important? So there's two ways to look at it. One way is to punishment Egypt. However, since Egypt's already being punished, who should be the beneficiary? Egypt is punished and all their wealth goes away because they're so bad, they're so evil, they're so mean. And since they're so mean, they're going to lose all their wealth. Egypt was emptied out. But since they're already being punished, who should be the beneficiaries? Let it be the Jews, the ones who suffered. That's one fashion of looking at it. The other fashion is no. The main emphasis, this is a reward to the Jews. They deserve it. However, while we're rewarding the Jews, we're going to use it as an opportunity to punish Egypt. Instead of rewarding them in the abstract, we'll reward them through Egypt's wealth, so Egypt is punished in the process. But the main focus is the reward of the Jews. These are two ways to look at this whole story. It's a little bit perplexing, and some people are bothered by it, that the Jews left, they took such wealth with them. And the Rebbe quotes a famous Talmudic story that later on, the times of Alexander the Great, the Egyptian leadership came to Alexander the Great and demanded that the Jews pay back. They took all the wealth. It says so in the Torah. They took away tremendous wealth. Pay it back. It was a very dangerous time for the Jews, and apparently they didn't know what to answer. And there's a man named Gevir ben Besisa, apparently not otherwise uncelebrated man. He wasn't one of the great scholars, but he was the miracle angel to come up with this response because it was a dangerous moment. Alexander the Great was a nice guy, and he was benevolent to Jews and everything, and Jews named their children after him, but he was very into fairness. And if the Egyptians had a good argument, the Jews would have to sell everything they owned to give it back. And this Gevir ben Besisa came up and said, maybe he wasn't a big scholar, but maybe he was an accountant, I don't know. He came up with a thing. He said, let's figure out how much you owe us for all these hundreds of thousands of men, women, and enslaved for 100 years, etc., and doing overtime. By the time they started figuring out the numbers, they realized, let's leave this one alone. So what do we see from that? That this was, in a sense, a reward, a payment. And it justifies the taking it, because what do you mean? Here's the bill, here's what you owe us, so it's a payment. But again, this is two ways to look at it, A and B. Is it primarily about punishing Egypt and the Jews are just taking the reward because someone's got to do it? Or really it's primarily an actual payment, as we find in the Gemara, in that story of Alexander the Great, that really it's a reward and actually a payment to the Jew. And the Rebbe points out that really these two approaches are based in the way we read the original verse in Lech Lecha in Genesis when Hashem promises it to Abraham. There's a phrase that says, Gamas Agoy Asher Yavoidu Don Anochi, the nation that they will serve, I will judge them, meaning I'll punish them. And then they will leave with great wealth. Do you read this verse in one flow where you break it in half? See, if you go by the approach A, there's a pause in the middle. The nation that they serve will judge, will be punished. That's the mind goal. And by the way, the Jews will also leave with great wealth. But that's a by the way, that's an outgrowth of the punishment. Or no, we read it in one flow. I'm going to punish the nation that enslaved them so that the Jews will leave in great wealth. And that's the main goal. Says the Rebbe, that Avraham Avinu, he's the father of the Jewish nation. He turns to God and he says to God, I want this to be about the Jewish people. I want it to be about them. And the reason why I want it to be about them, that they should get the reward, and they shouldn't get it in the middle of the night by stealing it during the darkness of the plague of darkness, or otherwise, underhandedly. No. The enslavement was experienced by them. The riches should be experienced by them. It shouldn't be some kind of sideshow. It shouldn't be some kind of underhanded business. The Jew should experience it because the slavery was experienced. And that's Avram's position. Avram firmly takes position B. And therefore, he wants it to be that it comes by the volition of the Egyptians. You know, if somebody is abused by another, financially or otherwise, in any way, God forbid, we shouldn't know it. So it's known that one of the ways of healing, in addition for the person, let's say, being made whole or whatever, is that the perpetrator owns up. One of the greatest suffering that people go through, people who suffer type of abuse from another, is the denial. It's a big factor. You know, the abuser denies that they did it, and the world believes them half the time. So not only am I not able to heal and begin the healing process, the whole world thinks that I'm the Michigan. So a big part of rehabilitation, if you will, after abuse, is the comfort. The Rebbe used the word nechama, tanchumim, the comfort that comes from perpetrator to the perpetrated. When the bad guy owns up and says, I was wrong and I did it and I admit, it doesn't make it all good, but that's a very important piece to begin the healing process. And so that's what happened here. The Egyptians abused the Jews, let's call it 80 or 90, 100 years, slave labor, gave the women's job to men and vice versa, took away their babies, thrown in the Nile, etc. All the things that we know, total abuse. Suddenly the Jews are going to leave and the Egyptians are going to say, okay, they left. Nothing happened. We're back to square A. You got to own up. And therefore, Avraham Avinu's language is that the enslavement is something that you fulfilled in them. Remember point number 2? They felt the enslavement in them. They need to feel the healing in them. This has to be rehabilitation. The bad guy has to own up. Don't make the Jews get their money in the middle of the night and run. You think they need money? They need rehabilitation. They need love. They need to feel validated that they were really abused and that the abuser is the one who comes and says, here, you deserve this gift. Take it. It's yours. Hence, we answered questions 1 and 2. Why does the Medrash point out that the Medrash says, Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu that I will make the Egyptians find favor to the Jews in order that Avraham Avinu should not complain. We evoke Avraham Avinu's name because this is something that, from the perspective of Abraham, our father, he's a father. He cares about his children. And the children suffered in a fashion that this was fulfilled in them. They experienced the abuse. They need to experience the redemption. And therefore, they need to be given this by their abuser, by their taskmasters, by the Egyptian, and be given to them in a good way. And that's what the Medrash is saying. So go back to here. Hashem promises, I'm going to give the Jews favor in the eyes of Egypt, and they won't leave empty-handed. But they're going to not leave empty-handed, not that they're going to rob it at night. The Jews will be given it by the Egyptians, because otherwise, if they just take it in some superstitious way, but if it's not given by Egyptians, Avraham Avinu, our father, who cares about us, so to speak, walking away whole from this experience, Avraham Avinu, the father, said, you fulfilled in them that they were enslaved and tortured. You didn't fulfill in them that they will leave with great wealth. They may have left with great wealth, but it wasn't fulfilled in them. They weren't validated in the process. Extraordinary. And then the Rebbe says that there's a third step. There's a third step. And that is the step of Parshas Bo. Parshas Bo, we say, you see, there's 3 steps. The initial prophecy is the Jews will have wealth. Maybe they'll take it. We don't say how they're going to get it. Maybe they'll just take it the middle of the night. They're going to go with wealth. Shemos says, no, I'm going to keep the promise to Avraham Avinu that I'm going to make the Jews feel corrected and rehabilitated, etc. And therefore, They're not going to take it. It's going to be given to them. Then Pasha's Bo, there's another step. Not only will be given to them, the Jews will request it. The Jews will sort of demand it. This is even more validation that it's theirs. It could be that it's given to them by the Egyptians, but more as a gift, as a placating gift. We abused you for 100 years. We feel terrible. And we owe you, and we owe you a big apology. We owe you some gifts. Here, take it. That's nice. A greater sense is, no, you owe it to me. It's not a gift. I don't have to give you a thank you. You owe it to me as payment. I've been a slave for 100 years. And that is felt, it's even more validation. It's not like, oh, you're so nice that you gave me a gift to make me feel good after you abused me for 100 years. You had to humbly accept my demand of payment, and you paid me, as per that Talmudic story. And therefore, this is even a greater step. And therefore, says the Rebbe, in Pashas Bo, when this additional step is added, here we have the Gemara. And the Gemara is commenting on this step. Now, why should the Jews ask for it? In Pashas Shemos, the emphasis is that Egypt will give it from their own volition. They're going to find favor. In Pashas Bo, the emphasis is that the Jews will actually ask for it. It's not going to just come. The Egyptians are going to knock on the door, say, please take it. The Jews are going to ask, tell the Jews they should ask for it. Why is that an important point? Why is that so important that Hashem says to Moshe, please tell them? Because if the Jews don't ask for it, there isn't an essence, a sense of demand that this is something that's coming to them as payment, but rather this is just something that the Egyptians are giving to them as gifts. It's still not the perfect rehabilitation. It's nice. Avraham Avinu, our father, is not going to feel that we were not placated for our abuse. No. We got it by the kindness of the Egyptian's heart, and it wasn't surreptitiously, it wasn't underhanded. It's nice, but it's not the perfect justice. And that's why the Gemara doesn't use Avraham Avinu, but it says that tzaddik. Tzaddik meaning the one who is just. That's what the word tzaddik means. Tzedek. The one who is just will not say, remember, we don't use the term will not complain. It's not a complaint, because the Jews got the money, and they didn't take it underhandedly. It was given to them by the Egyptians. So it was tit for tat. They were rehabilitated for the experience that was fulfilled in them, and the bad is not fulfilled in the good. It's all fine. But the tzaddik, the sense of absolute justice in Avram, which is that what the tzaddik really means, tzedek, says, is this fair? They worked for 100 years, slave labor, day and night, etc., etc., etc. And now they got gifts, a lot of gifts. Gifts you're giving me, it's payment. That's Pashas Bo and the Gemara on it. Tell the Jews they should go and ask it of the Egyptians. Yeah, it's written in a way of borrowing. They should feel the right to demand it or request it, and therefore becomes a whole different step. And therefore the Rebbe is introducing, so there's 3 levels. In Parashas Lech Lecha, the wealth may have been taken by the Jews. That means it's a punishment for Egypt. We don't yet know that it's really about the reward for the Jews. We don't yet know that it's really about the reward for the Jews. That would be column A. Just Lech Lecha alone, it could be, it's about punishing the Egyptians. Parsha Shemos teaches us, no, Avraham Avinu, Hashem says Avraham Avinu is not going to be happy with that. He's the father of the Jews, and he wants it to be about the Jews. They suffered, and they felt on their flesh every day for 100 years this burden of the enslavement. They are going to get rewarded, and it's really about them. The Egyptians' punishment is a sideshow. It's about my kinderlach getting what they deserve, and therefore it's a gift. It's a gift. It's not just a punishment to Egypt, and I'm picking up some fortune on your misfortune, albeit well deserved. No, it's a gift from you to me, from Egypt to the Yidden. Aha, rehabilitation. Furthermore, in Bo, it's not even a gift, it's actually a payment. And like any payment is something that you ask for, but you deserve it. Nobody asks for a gift. And therefore it becomes multi-layer, 2 layers, Shemos and Bo, reflected in the Medrash and the Gemara respectively. And the Rebbe answered all the questions. He answered, of course, the big question, why we even need Avraham Avinu's complaint to motivate Hashem to keep his promise, because this is not about whether or not he's going to keep it, but in what manner it will be done, that it will be given by the Egyptians and not taken by the Jews. We answered number 2, why the emphasis both in the Medrash and the Gemara, Kiyem Bahem, that the bad news and therefore the good news was fulfilled in them. Not it was fulfilled. Fulfilled in them, was fulfilled in integrated, internalized. They experience the bad, and therefore they have to experience the good, the rehabilitation, and therefore it has to be done in a healthy way as a gift or as even a payment from the Egyptians. And we further understood question 3, the difference between the Medrash and the Gemara. These nuances are perfectly understood. Because the Medrash is talking about Shemos, which explains why we need Egypt to give it. That evokes Avraham Avinu, a father. He was going to complain. You're not taking care of my kids. You're letting them pick up some booty that someone else lost, but really your focus is on that someone else punishment. It's my kids. But when it comes to the Gemara, where that's on Parshas Bo, where the emphasis is why the Jews have to ask for it and demand it, because that's the tzaddik element of Avraham Avinu. It's not really a complaint, but the tzaddik, the justice in him, is going to say, you didn't quite make it up to them. They worked 100 years. Did you pay them? Yes, I paid them. And they're going to go and ask for it, and they're going to get it as payment. So this is extraordinary. And this, again, the Rebbe is squarely saying that based on Avraham Avinu, we go with column B. It's a reward. And the fact that the Egyptians have to be punished, it's a sideshow. That's not really our concern. So now that we've accomplished that, all right, now that we've accomplished what? We've accomplished this. This is the takeaway so far from the Sikha. And we've answered all the questions. So now let's move on to the Chassidus part of the Sikha, which in and of itself is just as rich and deep as the first half of the Sikha and then some. The Rebbe says, so what's our takeaway? That we have an A and B way of looking. Oh, this should be an A. This should be an A. Avraham Avinu wouldn't like this. Okay. We have an A and B way of looking at the Egyptian wealth taking. That either it's about punishing Egypt and the reward of the Jews as a sideshow, or it's primarily about the Yidden. Says the Rebbe, that's like the Nigla, that's like the narrative of the story. Let's apply it to the Chassidus, to the spiritual. We know that the Egyptian exile and its goal, that the Jews should go to Mitzrayim and suffer, and they're going to come out with great wealth. Like, what's it all about? It had a tremendous goal. And what was it? What was it? It was either A or B. And this A or B is going to be the spiritual counterpart of the earlier A or B. Is it about refining Egypt's sparks? We know that in order for Yidden to get the Torah, as a preparation for the world to be ready for Har Sinai, Hashem has a purpose in creation. What's the purpose? To make the world a holy place. And how do you do it? By bringing out the divine sparks with which the world was created, etc., right? The whole world is really divine energy. And in every place, even in the darkest places, there's divine sparks. And the job is to elevate those sparks. And this is an important step towards Har Sinai, towards Mashiach, towards fulfilling Hashem's plan. And particularly of all places, we should start with Egypt, because it's the lowest place. It was considered the abomination of the land, of the earth. It's the lowest, most decrepit place spiritually and otherwise and morally. And therefore, the divine sparks there are very low. And we want to free them first and foremost. It was the most difficult and the most qualitatively and quantitatively important sparks to elevate. In fact, it says when the Jews left Egypt, they elevated 202 sparks from a grand total of 288. This is hinted in the word that V'gam Eidev Rav Ola Itam, right? That the Eidev Rav, the mixed multitude of insincere converts left with them from Egypt. Rav, the multitude, Rav is the numerical of 202, that the Jews left, they Ola Itam, they elevated with them the 202 sparks from Egypt. From 208 is the total number of sparks that exist in the entire creation. Upon Exodus, we already elevated 202. We're only left with 86, which is the numerical of Hashem's name, Shem Elokim. And since then, till Mashiach comes, we're busy finalizing the 86 sparks. The Rebbe explains in other places why in 100 years they managed to elevate 202, and for the rest of history, we're busy with the 86. And the short of it is that this was the highest level generation. All the souls of Israel were embodied in those 600,000 central souls, etc., etc. And they did the heavy lifting. They were the founding fathers. For the rest of history, we're going to pick up the pieces of the last 86. So this was a very big deal. This was a very important divine sparks, a very important, very low place. And by elevating it from the lowest place and emptying Egypt, which through its wealth, which spiritually means emptying it from all its sparks. By the time it was over, there's nothing left in Egypt, which is explained in Chassidus, and the Arizal explains why it's a sin to go back to Egypt, not just because we don't like them. The Torah says it, and it's a sin to go back to Egypt. There are exceptions if you need to go or what have you, but generally it's a sin to go back. Why? So the Arizal says Kabbalistically, because wherever a Jew goes for a purpose, to elevate the sparks. Peter Nanitzutas, why does a Jew go to a place that he should, through doing things in a Jewish kosher way, he's elevating the godly sparks that are in every physical object. But if all the sparks are gone, what's the point of going to Egypt? It's empty. It's got nothing left. So this was a big part of the mission. But it's explained that since the Jews elevated Egypt's sparks, this would be column A. The Jews were also elevated in this process. And now they were refined to get ready for Har Sinai and to continue the mission. Because if you're able to elevate sparks from such a lowly place, and as evident from the fact that it was a very big suffering, because it's so lowly, you did the job for Hashem, the Jews were refined in the process. I think of the story with the Bacher in Lubavitch was given very hard work in baking the matzah, Erev Pesach. And at the end of the process, the previous Rebbe was told by his father, in his role as the menal of the yeshiva, as the principal of the yeshiva, that this new boy who came to the yeshiva in Lubavitch, he needs refinement, and therefore give him the hardest jobs at the baking of the matzah. And they gave him the hardest jobs. And when it was all over, the boy was refined. The Rebbe Rashab said, he looks like a different person. So again, the purpose was the baking of the matzah. But in the meantime, it elevated this bacher. Similarly, the purpose is to elevate the sparks of Egypt. But in the meantime, it elevated the Jews, and the Jews gained spiritually and morally, and they were ready for Sinai. Wonderful, but a wonderful byproduct. The main goal is cleaning out Egypt and fulfilling Hashem's mission of making the world holy by starting from the lowest place. As the Rebbe always says, you pick something up from the bottom. Or Avraham Avinu would say, no, remember, it's column B. The reward was about the Jews, the wealth physically was about the Jews, and the wealth spiritually is about the Jews. It's not about Egypt's sparks alone. It's primarily about the fact that the Jewish people who are doing the work of elevating these difficult sparks were elevated in the process and reformed and refined and became an eternal nation. The language is, he put them in a Korah Barzel, he put us in a Kilin, which means that we're eternal and we're ready for Sinai. We'll never be broken. They become humbled to the extreme, whatever the explanations are, that why Egypt prepared them for Sinai. That's the real goal. That's the goal. The byproduct is, and by the way, we'll also clean up the sparks. This is two very different ways of looking at the purpose of taking out the wealth, on the spiritual sense of Peter Nanitzutis, of taking out the divine sparks. The Rebbe says Avraham Avinu, I think the Rebbe is siding with him, and God himself is siding with him, as evident from that verse in today's parsha and the parallel medrash, that it's really about the Jews. Yeah, we got to elevate Egypt, but we need to prepare the Jews for Sinai. Hashem wants his people to be holy and elevated and get the Torah and everything else. That's the purpose. Just like in the first part of the screen, the wealth was about rewarding the Jews. So it's unbelievable. So we have a whole different view on the whole thing of elevating Egypt. It's really about the Jews. It wasn't like Hashem needed to elevate Egypt, he needs someone to do the job, so he sent us. And since he sent us, he rewarded us in the process that we became stronger and spiritual. No, it's not like he needed someone to do that job. He needed us to become better. He needed us to become his amazing people. And therefore, Egypt was the supporting actor. They were only there to enslave, etc., for the sake of the Yidden. It's all Jewish-centric. It's Yidden-centric. It's all about Avraham Avinu and his children. It's a whole different level. So the Rebbe says, if that's the case, let's take it all the way to its logical conclusion. And that is not just about Egypt, but the general purpose of why we come down here on earth. Why is the neshama of a yid come down? It's a chelek elokim al mamish. It's a part of Hashem's light, and it feels Hashem's presence, and it comes down to a lowly earth on a mission of a lifetime. It's a difficult mission. What's the purpose? So if you ask somebody, I don't want to learn Tanya chapter 36, the basic Hasidus, basic Judaism from the perspective of Chabad, certainly, to make a home for Hashem. In the lowest place, it's got to come to the lowest place. And all the virtue, did it b'tachteinim, we want to make a home. It's worth it. It's worth the challenge. The neshama doesn't need it. The neshama is doing fine on high. Neshama doesn't come down for its own tikkun, for its own perfection. It doesn't need tikkun. It's wonderful. It comes down to perfect the world, including its own body and its animal soul and the world, to make a home for Hashem in the physical. But by the way, the neshama does get elevated too, because it does this great mission for Hashem. So if you do good work for Hashem, you get rewarded, you get elevated. And the neshama goes even higher after its mission on earth, after its journey on earth, because it did Hashem's bidding. It did a hard job. But the main purpose is a home for Hashem in the physical. Or the B approach is, no. The purpose of the soul coming down to earth is for the soul. This is very innovative. This is contrary to what is written in many places in Chassidus. And this is an innovation of the Rebbe. It's brought in numerous sichos. It's innovation of the Rebbe that the purpose of the neshama here on earth, yes, to make a dira b'tachtoinim, but the purpose of that mission and the purpose really of making the dira b'tachtoinim is not so much the home for Hashem, but for the yid to be the one to make it. This is so counterintuitive. The simple analogy that's given to this is that, a person likes a home. It is said that a person needs a home, not just a place to live, but a home is an identifying factor. I have a home. My home often mirrors my personality. The Gemara says, "Mishain li bias any other." If I don't have a home, I'm not a person. I need a home. I need to own it. I need to have it express my personality, my style. It represents my nest, my home base, etc., etc. So this person endeavors to build a home, and he invests time and energy and money and design and creativity. This is his home. This is his dream. He wants to have a home because that's what represents a person expressing his essential humanity. And then as soon as the home is ready, he invites his beloved bride to move into the home with him. What's the purpose of this whole project? The home took him 5 years to build. Is the purpose the home or the bride? Purpose is the bride. Without the bride, he's moving into an apartment. He sells the home the next day. The whole idea is he wants to have a home in the real sense. He wants to be able to live with his family, with his bride, with his soulmate. That's the purpose. The home is wonderful. A home defines a person. But if you think about it, ultimately, why does a home define a person? Because it represents his married life. It represents his soulmate connection. It represents living happily ever after with the person that's the other half of his neshama. Without that, he's not interested in the home, and therefore the home is really, in a sense, as deep as a home is within the human psyche. It's a sideshow. It's a supporting actor. And the Rebbe innovates. From what I understand, this is not brought in earlier Hasidus. In fact, the earlier Hasidus is written to the contrary. In plain language, till now, in the earlier Mamorim, especially in the Alter Rebbe, it's described that home, it's about the home. Hashem wants a home. And we are his beloved, as described in great detail in Song of Songs. We're that bride. He says to our bride, "Oh, you help me make the home. You'll make it beautiful. You'll know how to decorate it. You'll make it wonderful. In fact, you'll move in with me. But the main goal is the home." Says the Rebbe, "No, don't you understand? The goal is the bride." So therefore, on the personal level, my neshama, your neshama, comes down on earth. Yeah, your job is to do Teda mitzvahs. Why? To bring Hashem down. Dira b'tachtainim, all that good stuff. What's the purpose? You. So that while you do the Dira b'tachtainim, you discover your essential bond with Hashem. This is an extraordinary, novel approach from the Rebbe. Just to explain some of the applications of this mind-blowing thing. I'm going to close the screen for now so we can talk. But the purpose of the screen was just to show how the Rebbe deduces this, so to speak. This is a sikha which brings together all areas of Torah. There are verses, there's a medrash, there's a Gemara, And based on the Medrash and the Gemara, the Rebbe explains to us there's the A and the B in terms of the physical reward of Egypt, that it's about the Jews. And then there's let's call it, there's some Kabbalah here in terms of the spiritual reward of Egypt, the Birur HaNitzutz, the elevating the sparks, that it's about the Jews. And now there's Chassidus. The whole purpose of creation, the whole Dinah B'Tachtonim, my whole soul coming on earth. You know what it's for? Hamad means to an end. We are the end. In fact, if you could say this, you have to say it in a whisper. Lest you were hit by lightning, that the whole reason why Hashem wants a home is you. The Dinah B'Tachtonim is a sideshow. If you could say such a thing. I'm going to close the screen just to explain what's the ramifications and what's the application. And if you try to, the sikh is done here. If you, in terms of the explanation, in terms of the structure of the sikh, I just want to add, I think, a few things which will illuminate this. And that is, to explain the difference between before the sikh and after the sikh, the way we look at our mission in life, is it about making Hashem his home, or is it about the fact that you, the Jew, makes that home? So the difference is, are we Hashem's slave or Hashem's child? Imagine I open a business and I hire employees or slaves to run it. Is the goal the business or the employees? Clearly the goal is the business. I couldn't care about the employees. It's the business. I need employees to run the business, but all I care about is the business. But if they're running the business, I'm going to give them, I'm going to take care of them. I'll make sure they're okay. Even if I hire animals to plow my field, I'll give them food. But it's not about them. Conversely, I establish a business so that my son can run the business. It's about my son. It's not about the business. The business becomes a sideshow, as we said earlier. And it's explained that normally in Chassidus, the highest level, that we serve Hashem like a slave. The Rebbe, in a footnote, points to Samach Vav, the famous discourse of the Rebbe Rashab, where many long ma'amorim on the difference between the service of a slave versus the service of a son, or the service of a simple slave versus a sophisticated slave who's Ebed Neman, like Moshe Rabbeinu. For the sake of simplicity, let's say a servant versus a son. And much of the Hamshech Samach Vav, much of the discussion is that the servant is a bigger edge because he's totally nullified. It's not about him. A Jew is nullified to Hashem, and like the language is kisher la'el v'chachamer l'masui, like the ox is to the yoke, and like the donkey is to his weight that he's carrying. It's not about him. You're not thanking the donkey. You're giving him food because you want him to, he's got to keep doing the work. It's not about him at all. I'm only created to serve Hashem. It's not about me at all. It's all about Hashem and his mission. And I should count my lucky stars that he gave me the schus to be part of the mission. But it's not about me at all. That's the conventional Hasidic way. And therefore, the highest form of service is I'm a simple servant. I have no appreciation of the work. I don't care about the work. I'm just a soldier, foot soldier. And we're not undoing that. That's a very high level of bittul and Kabbalah sale and commitment that it's wonderful, beyond wonderful. However, the Rebbe comes along and says, I want you to know there's another side of this. And ultimately being that we just concluded and the Rebbe is innovating to us in Dei Shvi in our generation, that really the whole purpose of creation, the whole purpose of your neshama coming on earth is you, because you reflect Hashem's child and you reflect Hashem's essence, and you reflect the analogy I gave before of his beloved, and he wants a home only because of his relationship with you. If that's the case, so then the service of the son becomes much greater. He doesn't just want, we should just do it like a soldier. He wants us to be into it. He wants us to feel the accomplishment of it. He wants us to be like a partner in it. And feel, when we do a mitzvah, as the Rebbe says under the Sikha, to do what so the Mashiach should come, we're invested. We're partners. We're in it. It's about us. It's about us having that home with Hashem. And therefore, we become part of the mission. The Rebbe alludes in the footnote to the famous story that the Rebbe Rashab was at a convention of rabbis dealing with government leaders, and he was trying to break a certain decree. And at a certain point, he was not successful. The meeting did not succeed. So the Rebbe Rashab fainted. and this was considered a big chutzpah towards the government, a big protest. So they put him into house arrest in his hotel room. So he was visited by one of the great scholars who was also at the convention, one of the great rabbis, Rabbi Chaim Brisker. And he walks into the Rebbe Rashab's room. He's visiting he's visiting the arrested one. And he walks in, and the Rebbe Rashab is crying. And he says, Lubavitcher Rebbe, like, why are you crying? We did everything we could. And the Rebbe Rashab said, yeah, but the mission has not been accomplished. The Rebbe told the story by Fabrengens, and the Rebbe pointed out that that's what the Rebbe Rashab wants, that we shouldn't be like workers of Hashem alone and dedicated workers, but at the end of the day, when we go home, it's not my problem. But we should be like the owner. We should be like a partner. We should be, in the context of the Sikha, it's not like Hashem needs a home, so we're making him a home so that he'll give us a payment. He needs us. We're the home. We're part of the family. It's about the Yid, and therefore the Yid does a mitzvah with a whole different level of simcha and of joy. He's part of the mission. And he cares about the mitzvah being accomplished, and he cares about another Yid doing a mitzvah, because that's how we're going to fulfill Hashem's mission, because Hashem's mission becomes our mission because we are central to it. We're not just the people that we happen to pick on or choose to do that mission. So this is a big innovation, and again, it's contrary, if you will, and it can't be in conflict, but it's contrary to a lot of things that were studied in Chassidus till now, that the main edge is the service of the Yaved, of the slave. Ultimately, even greater than ever wants to say the service of the Eved Neman, or the son, who feels part of the mission, because that is really the ultimate purpose is to make Hashem a home. But the ultimate purpose of the home is the Yid to live in the home, or for Hashem's presence in that home to be felt by the Yid and experienced by the Yid. I want to just endeavor one more nuance. And again, here too, you could stop. But I want to just endeavor to explain just a drop further why this is such a bombshell. Like, why is it such a big deal to fathom that the Jew is the purpose of Hashem's creation? Why not? A Yid is Chelek al-Kamimal, a Yid is a great thing, it's a neshama, it's a holy thing. Like, why is this such a bombshell that it took till Deir Shvi for it to be revealed and explained, and etc.? That it's a huge deal, and the great maskilim, those who understand Chassidus, are trying to wrap their heads around it. Like, this is a big deal. So I want to just endeavor briefly to touch upon this. And I'm going into dangerous places because we're talking about Hashem's purpose, the purpose of Atzmos, the purpose of the essence of Hashem. So to explain like this, that why is it, how do we understand that the purpose of Hashem's creation of the world, the language is, Hashem had this desire, unexplained desire, to have a home in the lowest world. Why in the lowest world, and why unexplained? You and I don't do things for no reason. And there are many reasons explained in Torah why Hashem created the world. It shows his infinity and it shows his kindness. He wanted to do kindness. But the ultimate reason that's given is, all those reasons are not the ultimate. The ultimate reason is that Hashem had this unexplained desire to have a home for himself. A home represents a home for the essence. A home is where you are your total self. You're without clothing. It's your essence. Hashem had this unexplained desire to have a home for his essence in the lowest world. Why in the lowest world, and why is it unexplained? Why didn't he do something with a good reason? Why did he have to do something with no reason? The language is this. He had this desire, and the Alter Rebbe, and it's explained. The Rebbe Rashab says, that you can't ask why when it comes to a desire. He has a desire. That's what he wants. What's the value in that discussion? So the Rebbe says that when we're talking about Hashem's essence cannot have anything that's complementing it. On the level of Hashem's essence, there's nothing besides him. On the level of the divine light, the infinite light, the finite light, there's a relationship between it and Hashem and the world. But on the essence of Hashem represents, there's nothing. There's just him. That's what the essence of Hashem is the only truth. And that's it. Goodbye. There's nothing to talk about. And on that level, you cannot give any reasons for creation. the world is revealing his kindness. What kindness? It's just him. And there's no one to reveal it to, and there's no light, and there's no infinity, there's no finite. It's just Hashem. The essence means the essence. And so what's the explanation? The point is, he wants it for no reason. He wants it just because. If you're on a level where it's just you, if you think about it, by the way, on some level, humans mirror this, that the things that are most important to us, we don't have reasons for. We have reasons why we want to make money so we can have a house. We want to have money to buy food. But why we want to live, there's no reason. Why we love our children, there's no reason. So the things that are most essential are beyond reason. But how much more so in Hashem, when you talk about Hashem's essence, Atzmos, there is nothing besides, there's no relationship, there's no light, it's just him. And therefore, there can't be any value to what he does. He does it because he does it. He is because he is. He wants because he wants. And therefore, that want is reflected in the lowest place, you see. Because any of the higher worlds, they don't reflect this concept that there's no value to the project. The higher world is tremendous light, there's tremendous goodness, tremendous infinity, tremendous power, there's angels, there's lights, there's sephirot, there's a lot of goodness, there's tremendous wealth, there's trillions. Hashem says, find me a place where there's no value. It's a physical place. There's no light. It doesn't even recognize its source. It's like dead. Aha! That's what I want. And you know what I want you to do? I want to take a lulav and shake it. I want to take straps and wrap it. Tefillin. I want to take a candle and light it. Shabbos licht. I want to make a kiddush and a cup of wine. All this stuff is just physicality, which represents complete absence of any divine energy. Aha! Good. What do you mean good? What'd you do? Nothing. Perfect. I want it. Because this reflects the fact that it's an I, which there is nothing that can complete him. The only thing that completes him is himself. He wants it, and that is reflected in the physicality of the essence of what the mitzvahs do. And that's why ultimately Chassidus says that as much as the value, this is deep and profound, and I'm saying it briefly, and I'm sure I'm not understanding it fully. So if this is not something that you're appreciating, you can hang up now. But to the extent that it's helpful to somebody, I want to share it. That's why Chassidus says, as much as there's a tremendous emphasis in the geshmak and the kavanah, when you do a mitzvah and you feel it, and you feel the love of Hashem, and you understand the meaning of the mitzvah, and all these are true. Ultimately, where do you really touch Hashem? In the physical. Stop with your kavanah, shake the lulav. You took a branch of a tree. Yeah, this is the essence. There is no why. And here's the analogy I always use when I want to bring out this point. Famous Hasidic story, which Rabbi Khan uses as an analogy, as an example for this same point. That there was a Chassid in Russia who was exiled. One of the Chassidim was exiled at the time of the previous Rebbe. A Shlomo Chaim Kesselman, who later survived, went to Israel, was the famous mashpia of that generation. And when he was exiled, his wife was pregnant with twins. And he was exiled for a number of years, I don't know how many, and he didn't see the twins till many years later. These twins later grew up, and they lived in Israel for many years. They lived long lives. I knew them. I mean, when we were kids in Crown Heights, every year for the month of Tishrei, these two twins would come. By then, they were 60 and 70 years old, etc. All the Kesselmans that you know come from these two twin brothers. But going back to our story, so the father is sent away in exile, his wife is pregnant, and then she has twins. She wants to keep the husband in the loop, so she keeps sending pictures. Obviously, some of them didn't make it to the father with the censorships, but occasionally we get the pictures. He would get the packages, and he would get the pictures. And it meant a lot to him. But he never allowed himself to cry. Obviously, he had to be tough to survive this exile. And he never allowed himself to cry. He saw the pictures of his own two boys. They're babies now. They're a year old now. They're 2 years old. They're crawling. They're this. Obviously, it was very deep. But he never allowed himself to cry when he saw the pictures because he couldn't afford the weakness. He had to be strong. But then when they had their third haircut by the Yapshenish, and the mother cut their hair, she took pieces of their hair, locks of their hair, sent it to the papa. And when it came to locks, and he's holding on to the locks of his children's hair, he couldn't contain himself, and he burst out crying. And Rabbi Khan would explain that the difference is, this is the difference between the essence and the revelation. All the higher levels, because when you look at a picture, he sees the kids. You hold it here, you see nothing. But precisely because you see nothing, you have everything. Don't tell me to look at my kids. Give me my kids. Like when you hug somebody, it's much more powerful than when you look at them. He had the locks. He's touching them. It broke him. This becomes a very important analogy for the way we look. and our relationship to Hashem in the higher realms, the way the malachim, the angels, and the souls, and higher realms, etc., relate to Hashem, it's like pictures. They see divine light. Bigger pictures, gorgeous pictures. It's unbelievable. They're screaming, Kaddish, Kaddish, holy, holy. Hashem is gorgeous. It's amazing. And it's a big blow up in the higher worlds until the worlds of infinity. And the tzimtzum and everything else. Amazing. But it's a common name. It's all pictures of Hashem. It's wonderful. But when you take a lulav and you shake it, or you take a mezuzah, or say potato, or a kiddush cup, you're touching the locks. This is a piece of Elikos. Precisely because it has no revelation, just like in the analogy of Kesselman. You don't see nothing. What's there to see? See denotes that I don't have it. I got to see it. Seeing means I have a strong relationship to something else, but I don't have that something else. I can see it. No, I'm not seeing nothing. I have it. Just like you can't see yourself, because you are you. Unless you look in the mirror or in the Zoom screen. But so our relationship to Hashem down here through physical mitzvahs, and that's why this is the greatest part. This is the Dina B'Tachtainim. This is the real ultimate mission, and all the spiritual realms and all the mystical experiences that we could have in Gan Eden pale by comparison ad infinitum to what we accomplish by one bracha, by one physical mitzvah. Because here we're hugging Hashem. We got the locks. It's the essence. Precisely because it's dark, and that's why it's a home for the essence of Hashem. So now you understand why it's such a big innovation to say that home, its real purpose is the Yid. Last time I checked, what's the virtue of a Yid? He has a neshama. It's very bright, very great. He's not just a malach. He's mamish, a divine light, like a sephira. It's like a lakus, divine light, but it's all pictures. So how could a Yid reflect the essential value? Remember, we're talking about reflecting the home for Hashem's essence. On that level, there's nobody besides him. So don't tell me that a Yid is a wonderful angel. He's more than an angel. He's like spheres. He's like a lakus, divine light, which became a nivra. That's the language. And Hashem is a lakus, shanas a nivra. It's divine light, which was born into creation. This is all pictures. Higher, greater, wonderful. We're talking about Dina B'Tachtainim, a home for the essence, a place where there's just him. There is no relationship. There's nothing that's great there. It's just him. Comes along Howard Eben says, tired of Yidden. But you forgot one important point. Yisrael, Yidden Hashem are really one. On the essential level, I guess of the Yechida, on the essential level, a Yid is not a divine light, a divine energy, a divine thing, a wonderful Gilui Elikos, Chelek Elikah, a portion, a light, a revelation, an emanation. A Yid and his essence and Hashem's essence are absolutely one. It's not another thing. And therefore, the purpose is that Yid comes down and in the world of the human being, etc., as a Shama, which has all the experiences of a person, and takes that lulav and feels and connects to that concept of the aforementioned, that here's where you're touching Hashem's essence. The Yid has it. That's the purpose. To use the plain example that I gave before, I heard it from my friend and colleague, Rabbi Moshe, who uses it a lot, that you have I'm sure you heard it from Rabbi, you have the home, but it's about the spouse. It's about the beloved. And again, why is this so innovative? Because it necessitates, since we're talking about a home for Hashem's essence where nothing else exists, it necessitates going all the way that the Yid is not a reflection of Hashem. It's one. It's the essence. And therefore, this becomes and again, the takeaway is unbelievable. That when I'm going to do a mitzvah, one thing could be, well, I got to do this mitzvah. Hashem wants it. I'll do it. It'll give me a reward in this world, the next world. It's a wonderful thing. It's very important. The flip side is to say, you know why Hashem created tefillin and mezuzah and lulav and shofar and kiddush and davening, and it's about you. It's a sense of importance, a sense of essential connection. It's all about me. The whole system was created, so the whole Egypt was created and all of it sparks, so the Yidden can be elevated. The whole business was created so that the Yid could recognize his essential bond with Hashem. It's a mind-boggling thing. So we're very fortunate, to be Yidden and to have such a Eibishter and to have such a Rebbe, frankly, who tells us something that was never known before. And hopefully we'll see it very soon when the Mashiach comes, and we'll have the picture of the essence, and everything will be revealed even as it's the true essence.